She pushed open the door of the bar, and the little bell above jingled softly, announcing her presence. The room smelled faintly of whiskey, sweat, and polished wood. It wasn't the kind of place someone came to for comfort or luxury. It was a quiet corner for people who liked to blend into the shadows, people who knew things others didn't. She didn't come here for attention. She came because sometimes even the strongest need a place to breathe. Her footsteps were light but confident as she made her way to an empty stool at the bar. She wasn't in uniform tonight, and yet, there was a presence about her that drew eyes without trying. Most patrons were too busy in their own worlds to notice, but some felt it immediately, the kind of energy that only comes from someone who has walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. The bartender glanced up, giving her a polite nod. He had probably seen her before, or maybe just seen people like her. People who could survive things most of the world couldn't even imagine. She ordered a simple drink, nothing fancy, letting her eyes wander across the room while she waited. She didn't need the noise of the bar. The silence between thoughts was more valuable. She observed the patrons carefully. Some were laughing, some were quietly talking, and some were just staring into their glasses, lost in memories they didn't share. At a corner table sat a man with broad shoulders and a strong build, someone who carried authority without needing to announce it. There was something familiar about him. Maybe it was the posture, the calmness in the way he observed the room, or the quiet strength in his movements. He was a Navy SEAL, though she didn't know him personally. She could tell from the way he carried himself, the alertness in his eyes, the way his hands rested casually but ready, like someone who had been trained to react at any moment. For a moment, they both noticed each other. Not in a threatening way, but with a silent acknowledgement. There was respect in that glance, the kind that doesn't need words. In her line of work, she had learned that first impressions mattered. But even more important was understanding people without them saying a word. He recognized her too, not by face, but by the aura she carried. People like them often ran in circles where legends and reality intertwined. She settled onto the stool, placing her drink in front of her. She wasn't here for attention, but she knew that when someone like him noticed her, things were about to get interesting. She could feel the subtle tension in the air. A bar, normally filled with chatter and laughter, seemed to shrink slightly, the background noise fading as people subconsciously took note of the energy around her. Something about her presence demanded attention without demanding it openly. The SEAL leaned back in his chair slightly, observing her. He was used to evaluating people quickly, seeing strengths and weaknesses within moments, and sizing up situations with experience gained from countless operations. He noticed her posture, her calm breathing, the way her eyes scanned the room but also seemed distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. Most people would have missed the small details, but not him. Not someone trained to read between lines, to notice what wasn't said. Meanwhile, she remained quiet, sipping her drink, letting him make the first move if he wanted to. She wasn't confrontational, but she wasn't timid either. Her calmness wasn't fake. It was earned. She had spent years in situations where hesitation could mean life or death. That experience gave her a kind of quiet power, a confidence that didn't need to be shown with words. People could sense it even if they didn't understand it. There was a soft clink as someone set a glass down too hard nearby, and she glanced up briefly, almost like she was letting the world know she was aware of everything, yet focused only on what mattered. Her eyes returned to the SEAL, and though no words were exchanged, a silent challenge seemed to pass between them. In places like this, words often came later. First came observation, recognition, and subtle acknowledgement of ability. The bartender set her drink down with a practiced hand. She nodded once, not needing to say thank you. Her mind was elsewhere, running through the scenarios she often rehearsed mentally, thinking about the world she lived in behind closed doors, missions, decisions, and the countless times she had to rely on her own skill and judgment. In the middle of ordinary people, she carried extraordinary experience, invisible yet undeniable. As the evening went on, she stayed calm, composed, blending into the dimly lit surroundings, while still commanding attention in ways most people couldn't explain. There was a sense of anticipation, a feeling that something was about to happen, even if no one yet knew what. The seal continued to observe, intrigued by her confidence, the way she carried herself, the quiet assurance that she belonged here without needing to prove it. The bar continued its usual rhythm, glasses clinking, conversations drifting. But somewhere in the corner, two sets of eyes measured each other, silently acknowledging strength, experience, and the unspoken code that only those who had lived through danger could understand. And in that moment, the night, the bar, and the ordinary people around them faded away. It was just her, him, and the silent recognition that legends sometimes appeared where least expected. The bar continued its low hum of chatter, glasses clinking, and laughter bouncing off the walls, but the tension around her seemed to grow without her doing anything. She sat there quietly, calm, letting the atmosphere settle around her. Most people would never notice, but those trained to read energy could feel it. And the Navy SEAL in the corner was doing exactly that. He had been observing her since she walked in, his trained eyes catching every subtle movement, every slight shift in posture. He knew something about her was different. There was power in her calm, authority in her ease, and a story behind her presence that could silence a room. He finally leaned forward, resting one elbow casually on the bar, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a hint of a smirk on his lips, a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "So," he said, his voice low but confident, "what's your call sign?" It wasn't really a casual question. Among military circles, call signs carried immense weight. They were earned through action, respect, and sometimes through legend. Asking for it wasn't just curiosity. It was a challenge, a way to gauge someone's confidence, experience, and reputation. The words hung in the air, and she felt the shift immediately. Conversations around them seemed to dull, the laughter and chatter fading as if the room itself was waiting. People might not have understood what was happening, but they could feel it. Something important was unfolding. The bar, which had felt ordinary just moments ago, now seemed smaller, more focused, with all attention unknowingly drawn to her and the seal. She sipped her drink slowly, her eyes never leaving his. There was no rush, no nervous twitch, just steady calm. Most people would have felt pressured, maybe even intimidated by the question, but she was used to situations like this. In her line of work, every word, every action could carry consequences. She had learned patience, observation, and how to maintain control in even the most tense moments. Her calmness wasn't weakness. It was precision, honed over years of experience. The seal chuckled softly, assuming she was playing coy. Many would hesitate, trying to test the waters, see if the asker was serious. But she didn't flinch, didn't smile nervously, and didn't respond immediately. She let the question sit there, like a weight pressing gently but firmly. It was a subtle display of power. By not rushing, by not giving an immediate answer, she was already showing that she controlled the situation, that she had nothing to fear. Around them, a few patrons noticed the subtle exchange. Some were regulars, some were strangers, but all sensed something unusual. The air seemed heavier, like the bar itself was holding its breath. People instinctively quieted down, lowering their voices, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. They couldn't see it, couldn't name it, but the tension was unmistakable. The seal's amusement started to fade. He had seen many people in his life, met countless individuals who claimed experience or skill, but something about her presence was different. He noticed the calm in her eyes, the ease in her posture, the subtle strength in her gestures. This wasn't someone pretending to be confident. This was someone who had earned it, someone who had faced challenges most people couldn't even imagine. She set her glass down carefully, her fingers brushing the rim lightly, showing the same steady control in the simplest of actions. Every small movement mattered, and she knew it. She had learned that people observed even what seemed insignificant. And right now, every detail of her presence was speaking louder than words could. The seal leaned a little closer, his curiosity growing, unaware that he was stepping into a moment that would leave him stunned. For a brief moment, there was silence between them. No words were exchanged, but the energy was palpable. In the military, experience and reputation often preceded people, and call signs carried the weight of that history. By asking her for hers, the seal had unknowingly set the stage for a moment of revelation. The question wasn't just about a name, it was about respect, recognition, and understanding the depth of someone's skill and story. Finally, she allowed herself a small pause, just enough to let the anticipation build. Not out of hesitation, not out of fear, but as a deliberate act to show control. She could have spoken immediately, given a simple answer, but where was the power in that? Instead, she let him, and everyone else in the bar, unknowingly, feel the gravity of what was coming. Every second stretched, heightening curiosity, drawing attention subtly, silently, irresistibly. The seal, for all his experience, was now genuinely intrigued. He had asked the question casually, almost as a joke, but he could already sense that her answer would not be ordinary. He had encountered legends in briefings and debriefings, in stories shared quietly among peers, but he had never expected to meet one in a place like this. The calmness in her eyes, the quiet authority in her demeanor, and the confidence in her stillness hinted that her call sign was more than just a name. It was a story, a legacy, and a warning all at once. The rest of the bar, sensing the subtle shift, continued their activities, but with a subconscious caution. They didn't realize it, but they were in the presence of someone who could command silence without speaking, respect without demanding it, and awe without showing it. And in that quiet, tense moment, the stage was set. A simple question had transformed the ordinary bar into a room filled with anticipation, curiosity, and unspoken respect. She leaned back slightly, her eyes still steady, her mind focused. When she finally spoke, the words would carry weight. But for now, the silence, the calm, and the tension told the story. The seal had issued a challenge, but she hadn't flinched. Instead, she owned the moment, and everyone around, whether they knew it or not, was about to witness something unforgettable. The tension in the bar thickened with each passing moment. Even though the chatter of patrons continued, there was an invisible force that seemed to pull attention toward her. She sat calmly on the stool, her posture relaxed but perfectly poised, like a predator assessing its surroundings before making a move. Her eyes scanned the room briefly, not because she was searching for danger, but because she had trained herself to notice everything. The subtle cues, the slightest shift in body language, the unspoken tension in a room. It was this awareness that set her apart from everyone else in the bar, and it was something the Navy SEAL in the corner had already begun to recognize. He continued to watch her, leaning slightly forward with an expression that combined curiosity and professional caution. He had asked her question lightly at first, expecting a casual answer, perhaps even a playful dodge. But there was no hesitation that seemed ordinary, no nervous glance, no shift of weight that would suggest uncertainty. She was calm in a way that was unnerving, and that calm carried a weight. A history that whispered stories of missions, challenges, and life-or-death situations most people couldn't even imagine. As she sipped her drink, she let a small smile tug at the corner of her lips. It wasn't an invitation or a show of friendliness. It was the subtle acknowledgement of control. She could feel his eyes on her, studying, evaluating, but she didn't flinch. That confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet strength earned from years of rigorous training and situations where every second, every decision, had mattered immensely. She had learned to carry herself this way, to convey power without shouting, to command respect without forcing it. And now, unknowingly, the SEAL was witnessing the first layer of it. The bar seemed to grow quieter, though no one said it aloud. The human mind is trained to sense energy, and the weight of hers had begun to influence everyone nearby. Patrons who were mid-conversation lowered their voices. Others paused mid-motion, subconsciously recognizing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. There was a pause in the background noise, subtle but noticeable, as if the room itself had taken a breath and was waiting for the moment when she would respond. The SEAL's smirk had softened into a more serious expression. He wasn't used to surprises like this. In his line of work, he had encountered many who claimed experience, many who carried themselves with bravado, and many who were truly skilled. But very few projected the combination of calm, control, and unspoken authority that she did. His curiosity had shifted from casual interest to genuine intrigue. He wanted to know her story, to understand what had shaped someone capable of commanding a room with nothing more than presence. She set her drink back down lightly, letting her fingers brush the glass as if to emphasize that she was in no rush. Every motion was deliberate, every breath measured. She knew how subtle cues could speak volumes. People like him, trained to read these things, could tell more from a gesture than from words. She understood this perfectly, and she used it to her advantage. The pause, the calm, the control. It all spoke of someone who had faced danger, had faced challenges most would flee from, and had survived with skill and intelligence. For a moment, there was an almost imperceptible exchange of energy between them. He leaned slightly closer, trying to gauge her reaction, testing the boundaries of this silent tension. She met his gaze without flinching, holding her composure perfectly. The room around them faded into a blur, the other patrons existing only as background noise to the unspoken duel of awareness and anticipation unfolding at the bar. Her mind, however, was focused not on him or the bar but on timing. She had learned that the right moment could magnify impact exponentially. A well-timed reveal, a controlled response, could command respect and leave a lasting impression. She had mastered this skill long ago, in places where hesitation could cost lives. Now, it was simply a matter of letting the moment mature until it reached its peak. The seal's eyes narrowed slightly. Even he, with all his experience, could feel that something extraordinary was coming. He had seen legends in briefing rooms and on screens, but seeing one in person, here and now, in a seemingly ordinary setting, was disorienting. He had asked a question expecting a routine answer. Instead, he was faced with calm, control, and quiet confidence, the hallmark of someone who had earned a call sign not through words, but through actions that demanded recognition. She remained still, letting the anticipation build subtly. Every small sound in the bar, the clink of glasses, the quiet laughter, the shuffle of feet, contrasted with the intense stillness of their corner. The tension was tangible now, almost visible, and it was clear to the seal that he was about to witness something rare. The unspoken respect was forming even before she spoke, proving that true authority didn't need announcements or demonstrations. Patrons around them, unaware of the full story, were nonetheless affected. The human subconscious is quick to recognize energy, even without context. They felt it, though they didn't know why. The ordinary bar had transformed into a stage for an extraordinary moment, and all eyes, even those not directly observing, were subtly drawn to her presence. And in that quiet, charged moment, she remained composed, exuding strength without aggression, power without arrogance, and confidence without showing off. The stage was set, the tension had reached a near-perfect point, and the moment of revelation, the call sign that would leave the room silent, was almost ready to arrive. The seal shifted slightly, now fully attentive, fully aware that this was no casual encounter. He had unknowingly challenged someone exceptional, and the full weight of that realization was dawning on him. And as she prepared to respond, the bar itself seemed to lean in, holding its breath, ready for the name that would command respect, awe, and silence all at once. She paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch, though it wasn't hesitation born of fear. She had been in situations where hesitation could have meant life or death, and she knew perfectly well that she was in no danger here. This pause was deliberate, a subtle assertion of control. By not rushing, by not immediately answering, she made the Navy SEAL, and anyone watching, feel the weight of what was coming. It was a skill she had honed over years of training, experience, and countless operations. Timing, she had learned, was everything. The SEAL leaned back slightly, an amused smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He thought she was merely being coy, that she might be teasing him, enjoying the little game of suspense. Many people might have reacted nervously, stuttered, or tried to dodge the question. But she didn't flinch. She didn't smile in a way that betrayed uncertainty. Her calmness was absolute, almost unnerving. And in that calm, there was power, the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who had seen things few could imagine and survived. The bar itself seemed to grow quieter. Not intentionally, but because energy like hers naturally draws attention. Even if people didn't know why, they sensed that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Patrons lowered their voices mid-conversation, glasses paused halfway to mouths, and even the bartender seemed to work a little slower, as if the room had collectively acknowledged that this was no ordinary encounter. There was a palpable tension in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like the calm before a storm. Her eyes met his, unwavering. In that gaze, there was a silent message. She knew who she was, she knew what she had done, and she knew the weight of her presence. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence born from experience. Confidence earned in places where mistakes were unforgivable, where hesitation could cost lives, and where respect was won through action, not words. The seal, trained to read people, recognized this immediately. He realized that she wasn't playing games. She was in complete command of the moment. She finally leaned back slightly, taking a slow, deliberate sip of her drink. Her movements were fluid, graceful, controlled. Each action reinforced the calm authority she exuded. She wasn't trying to intimidate. She didn't need to. People like her didn't need to prove themselves verbally. Their presence alone spoke volumes. And right now, in this dimly lit bar, her presence was telling a story far louder than any words could. The seal's expression shifted subtly. The smirk faded, replaced by genuine curiosity and a hint of respect. He had seen confidence before, but what he was witnessing now was different. It wasn't superficial. It wasn't showmanship. This was the calm of someone who had faced extreme danger, who had survived missions others couldn't even imagine, and who carried that experience with quiet authority. The brief pause she had taken wasn't just dramatic. It was strategic, a test of composure and a declaration of power. Around them, a few patrons had begun to notice the shift. They didn't know her story, didn't know the magnitude of what was about to happen, but they felt it. Energy like hers is contagious. It alters the mood of a room even if its origin is invisible. The ordinary chatter of the bar had faded into the background, replaced by a tense anticipation that was almost tangible. People's eyes flickered toward the corner, drawn by the subtle magnetism of her presence. She put her glass down carefully, the faint sound of it hitting the counter resonating through the quiet. Every detail mattered. The way she held herself, the precision of her movements, the confidence that radiated without a single word being spoken. The seal watched closely, his instincts telling him that he was on the verge of witnessing something remarkable. He had asked the question lightly, almost in jest, but now he understood that the answer would carry weight far beyond casual conversation. In that moment, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible pause, letting the anticipation build further. Not out of nervousness, but because she knew the power of timing. She had spent years mastering the art of subtle influence, of making moments count. Every second she delayed heightened the impact of her eventual revelation, creating a sense of expectation that was almost tangible in the air. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was charged, full of unspoken respect and unacknowledged authority. The seal, despite his experience, found himself leaning forward slightly, more attentive, more alert. He had encountered many skilled individuals in his life, but few who commanded attention without speaking, few who could hold a room's energy in balance with nothing but presence. He had asked a question expecting a casual answer, perhaps even a joke, but he was beginning to understand that this encounter was far from ordinary. She was ready. Every instinct, every muscle, every thought was poised for the moment. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. Her hesitation was intentional, a demonstration of control, and a prelude to the revelation that would soon follow. In her calm, deliberate way, she had shifted the dynamics of the room, commanding respect not through words or gestures, but simply through presence. And as the seal's eyes remained locked on hers, the bar around them seemed to hold its breath. The ordinary patrons, unaware of the full story, still felt the change in energy. Something powerful was about to happen. something that would leave everyone in that bar silent and in awe. And in that quiet, charged moment, it was clear. When she finally spoke, her words, or rather, her call sign, would carry the weight of her entire experience, instantly demanding respect. Finally, she leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto the Navy SEALs with unwavering calm. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture controlled. The bar seemed to shrink around them, the chatter and background noise fading into nothing. Patrons unconsciously leaned closer, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold, even if they didn't yet understand why. The moment was heavy with anticipation, like the pause before lightning strikes, and she knew it. Her lips parted, and she spoke with a voice that was steady, calm, and quiet, yet carried immense power. Night Raven. The words seemed simple, but their impact was immediate and overwhelming. The name itself, short and precise, held weight, history, and reputation. It wasn't just a call sign. It was a statement. A life lived through danger, training, and missions that demanded skill, courage, and composure. Those three words transformed the atmosphere in the bar completely. The Navy SEAL's smirk vanished instantly. His eyes widened slightly, a mixture of shock, respect, and disbelief crossing his face. He had heard legends, seen reports, and known names whispered in briefings, but he hadn't expected to meet one in such an ordinary setting. The casual bar, the dim lighting, the everyday people, none of it seemed to fit the reality of who she really was. And yet, here she was, calm, composed, and commanding authority with nothing more than a single statement. The bar fell into dead silence. Conversations stopped mid-word. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the bartender, who had seen countless people come and go, froze, sensing the shift. The name Night Raven carried a reputation that demanded attention, respect, and caution. Patrons who had been laughing, joking, or scrolling through their phones suddenly felt the weight of her presence. It wasn't fear that made the room quiet. It was awe. People instinctively recognized that this was someone extraordinary, someone who had lived through challenges most could never imagine. She didn't need to do anything else. The room responded to her mere presence and the power of her call sign. It was an invisible force, undeniable and magnetic. Even the SEAL, with all his experience and exposure to elite operators, felt a jolt of respect. He realized that he had underestimated her. He had asked the question as a test, maybe even as a playful challenge, and now he understood the mistake. Legends like hers didn't need to prove themselves. They revealed themselves in moments like this, leaving everyone around them stunned. Her eyes remained steady, scanning the room briefly, acknowledging the reactions without arrogance. The subtle shift in posture, the way she held herself, reinforced her confidence and authority. She had mastered the art of presence over years of missions, challenges, and operations where control and composure were the difference between success and failure, life and death. In that moment, the entire bar, unknowingly, became a stage for her demonstration of quiet power. The SEAL, for all his training and experience, found himself momentarily speechless. He had been challenged, but he had underestimated who he was challenging. He realized that she had earned every ounce of respect that came with the call sign Night Raven. It wasn't just a name. It was a symbol of skill, courage, and a life lived at the edge of danger. He felt a rush of admiration, knowing that this was someone whose reputation was fully deserved, whose presence demanded recognition without needing to shout or boast. Around them, patrons began to process the moment. The chatter slowly resumed, but it was subdued, cautious, almost reverent. People exchanged glances, some whispering quietly, sensing that they had witnessed something remarkable. Even those who didn't understand the military significance of a call sign could feel the energy that had swept through the room. It was like the air itself had changed, thick with respect and awe, a silent acknowledgement of greatness. She finished her drink slowly, deliberately, as if punctuating the moment. There was no rush, no need to celebrate. The impact of her call sign had already spoken volumes. She had commanded attention, earned respect, and left an unforgettable impression. All without raising her voice, without any dramatic gesture, without forcing recognition. It was the quiet, natural authority of someone who had earned their place through action, not words. The seal finally recovered, leaning back slightly, his expression one of genuine admiration. He understood now why the name Night Raven was whispered in briefings and operations. He had assumed he was in control of the interaction, but she had quietly taken command from the very first moment she entered the bar. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone present that true legends don't need to announce themselves. They reveal themselves in subtle, unforgettable ways. Even after she left, the silence lingered. Patrons resumed their conversations, but there was a noticeable shift. People who had been skeptical or dismissive now carried a quiet respect. The bar, which had been ordinary moments ago, had become a place where something extraordinary had occurred. The story of Night Raven had been witnessed, if only for a brief, unforgettable moment, leaving a mark on everyone's memory. Her call sign, simple yet powerful, had done more than identify her. It had commanded the room, earned respect, and left an entire bar silent in awe, and she remained calm, as always, aware that she had made her point without unnecessary words, gestures, or effort. That was the power of someone who had lived a life of true skill, courage, and quiet authority. The instant she spoke her call sign, Night Raven, the entire atmosphere in the bar shifted. Silence blanketed the room like a heavy curtain. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause, and the faint clinking of glasses stopped mid-sound. People froze mid-conversation, mid-laugh, mid-motion, because there was something in that name that commanded attention. It was not just a word. It was a symbol, a reputation, a story that carried immense weight. Patrons didn't need to understand its full meaning. They could feel it, instinctively. The Navy SEAL, who had initiated the challenge, stared at her, eyes wide with a mix of shock, disbelief, and deep respect. His casual smirk had completely disappeared, replaced by something more serious. He had expected perhaps a modest answer or a playful dodge, but what he received instead was authority, skill, and undeniable presence in a single phrase. For him, it was a moment of reckoning. He realized that he was no longer in control of this interaction. She was, and she had done it effortlessly, with nothing more than a calm voice and a powerful name. Around them, patrons were slowly processing the scene. Some leaned closer, curious yet cautious, as if they were witnessing history in miniature. Others whispered quietly to each other, exchanging puzzled glances, sensing that something extraordinary had just occurred. No one laughed. No one spoke loudly. Even the bartender paused, drying a glass, and for a moment, everything in the room seemed secondary to the energy radiating from her. She had transformed an ordinary evening at a bar into a moment of silent awe, commanding respect without demanding it. The SEAL, a man trained to remain composed in life-or-death situations, felt a jolt of admiration. He had seen heroes, heard tales of legends, and even worked alongside remarkable individuals in the past. But she exuded all of that quietly, without the need for display. Her calm, collected demeanor, paired with the power of her reputation, had created an aura that demanded respect immediately. It was clear that she had earned her place not through boasting, but through actions and skill that spoke louder than words. Her gaze swept across the room briefly, taking in the subtle reactions of those around her. Some eyes widened in quiet disbelief, others turned down, almost in reverence. The realization settled in slowly. The woman before them was extraordinary. She wasn't just another patron having a drink. She was a figure whose life had been defined by courage, precision, and countless experiences that most people couldn't even imagine. And that realization came not from stories or headlines, but from a simple, calm declaration of her identity. The SEAL leaned slightly closer, his expression shifting from surprise to respect. In his line of work, call signs are more than names. They are earned, and they carry stories. Hearing Night Raven uttered so calmly, yet with the weight of every mission, every challenge, every risk she had faced, left him momentarily speechless. He understood immediately why the name was spoken in hushed tones in briefings and reports. He had inadvertently put himself in the presence of someone legendary, and it was impossible not to feel the impact. Every patron in the bar, whether aware of the significance or not, felt the shift in energy. Conversations resumed slowly, but now with a new undertone. A quiet awe, a deep respect. People instinctively recognized that they were witnessing someone extraordinary. Even strangers, who had no context, could sense that this was not an ordinary human interaction. She had demonstrated authority and presence that transcended ordinary social norms. The bartender, who had been polishing glasses for hours without interruption, set down his cloth and observed quietly. Even he could feel the invisible weight of her presence. Some moments in life don't require words. They demand silence, observation, and recognition. And this was one of those moments. Every subtle gesture, every quiet movement, every calm breath she took reinforced her aura of command. She didn't need to explain herself. Her presence said enough. The seal finally broke his silence, nodding slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. There was no need for verbal praise. Respect had been earned, silently but irrevocably. He realized that his challenge had been unnecessary. She had already shown her strength, skill, and authority simply by being herself and revealing her call sign. His earlier assumption of casual dominance was replaced with recognition and admiration. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the impression she left remained. Patrons who had been skeptical, dismissive, or unaware now carried a quiet reverence. The bar had transformed from a simple place of leisure to a space where people had witnessed something rare and powerful. She had accomplished this without raising her voice, without aggressive gestures, and without demanding attention. Her mere presence, paired with her earned reputation, had spoken volumes. Even after she moved, took another sip, or adjusted her posture slightly, the room remained charged with subtle awe. The seal continued to watch, fully aware that he had underestimated the moment and the woman who had just mastered it. He had asked a question almost jokingly, but she had turned it into a demonstration of authority, skill, and quiet power. She had shown that true respect is earned not through noise or intimidation, but through competence, calmness, and presence. And in that moment, the bar, once ordinary and filled with casual conversations, had been transformed. Every person in the room carried the memory of that instant, the weight of the name Night Raven, the calm assurance in her eyes, the undeniable authority in her presence. She had made an impact that would linger far beyond the few minutes she had been there. Respect had been earned, awe had been instilled, and the silent acknowledgement of greatness had been granted. The silence that followed her revelation lingered longer than anyone expected. It wasn't just the quiet that makes people pause. It was the kind of silence that demanded attention, the kind that comes from witnessing greatness. Every person in the bar felt it in some way. Conversations, which had tried to resume, faltered. The hum of activity dimmed to a mere background whisper. The name Night Raven wasn't just a call sign. It was a symbol, a story of courage, precision, and experience that carried weight far beyond the confines of this ordinary bar. The Navy SEAL, sitting in the corner, leaned back in his chair, trying to process what had just happened. His initial curiosity had turned into astonishment, and now into deep respect. He had challenged her casually, expecting perhaps a modest response or a playful dodge. Instead, she had revealed not just a name, but a presence, a power, and a reputation that immediately commanded respect. He realized that this was someone whose authority wasn't given. It had been earned, through countless missions, endless training, and experiences most could never imagine. She didn't need to do anything else. Her calm demeanor, steady gaze, and quiet confidence had already shifted the entire atmosphere. Even those who didn't understand the significance of a call sign sensed it intuitively. Humans are remarkably good at feeling power, even when it isn't spoken aloud, and her energy radiated authority in a way that was impossible to ignore. People instinctively leaned back slightly, lowered their voices, and observed her without fully knowing why. The SEAL's eyes remained locked on hers. He could see the history behind that calm stare. The countless nights in the field, the missions that demanded precision and nerve, the courage required to act decisively when lives were on the line. Night Raven wasn't just a name, it was a legacy. He realized, almost with a pang of humility, that he had underestimated her. What he thought would be a casual bar interaction had turned into a demonstration of skill, authority, and quiet dominance that left him momentarily speechless. Even the bar patrons, though unaware of the exact story, couldn't ignore the aura surrounding her. There was a subtle shift in body language throughout the room. Some leaned forward slightly, curious yet cautious. Others tilted their heads, trying to make sense of the energy that had overtaken the space. Even the bartender, who had served countless people over the years, paused mid-motion, instinctively sensing that something extraordinary had occurred. In the quietest of ways, she had transformed an ordinary evening into a moment of awe and respect. She allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, but even then, her composure was flawless. Nothing about her demeanor suggested arrogance or the need for recognition. She didn't need to prove herself. Her presence and her call sign had already done that. People naturally gravitated toward the authenticity of her calm authority. This wasn't performance. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had lived a life defined by action, courage, and skill. The seal, trained to remain composed in high-stakes situations, couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and respect. He had witnessed skill, bravery, and leadership in his career, but few could command attention simply by existing in a space. He understood now that her calm, measured presence, paired with the power of her reputation, made her someone to be taken seriously. In that moment, he recognized that the real challenge wasn't in asking her for her call sign. It was in meeting her at all and maintaining composure in her presence. Around them, the bar continued cautiously. Patrons resumed conversations slowly, their voices hushed, their gestures tempered. The shift in atmosphere was subtle but unmistakable. Where once there had been ordinary chatter, there was now a quiet reverence. People instinctively recognized that someone exceptional had just revealed herself, and that reverence lingered, almost like a ripple in the air. Even strangers, who had no idea what Night Raven meant, felt compelled to adjust their behavior, as if the room itself had acknowledged her authority. She remained seated, sipping her drink slowly, radiating the kind of quiet control that comes from experience and confidence. Every subtle movement mattered, the tilt of her head, the calm in her eyes, the measured way she set her glass down. It all spoke volumes. Those who were trained to read people like the seal could decipher the signals immediately. Others just felt it like a deep, instinctive recognition of greatness. The seal finally exhaled quietly, a gesture almost lost in the subdued atmosphere. Respect had been earned, not with words or actions, but with presence and reputation. He understood that she didn't need to assert herself aggressively. She had already done more than enough. The silent acknowledgement of her capabilities was enough to command attention, to earn admiration, and to instill awe in anyone who witnessed the moment. As the night progressed, the memory of her revelation lingered. Patrons returned to their routines, but the impact of that moment remained. The room had changed subtly. Conversations were tinged with caution, glances carried respect, and the atmosphere retained an intangible weight. She had transformed the space, leaving a mark on everyone present, even those who didn't fully understand why. In that quiet bar, under dim lights and amidst ordinary people, she had demonstrated the true power of presence, reputation, and quiet authority. She had shown that real respect isn't demanded. It is earned, silently and effortlessly, through skill, experience, and confidence. The seal and the patrons had witnessed a rare moment, and one that none would forget anytime soon. She finished her drink slowly, deliberately, as if savoring not just the taste but the moment itself. Every movement was calm, controlled, and graceful. There was no rush, no need to speak further, no gesture that demanded attention. The room had already acknowledged her presence, and her revelation of Night Raven had left a mark that words could never undo. She had transformed an ordinary bar into a space filled with quiet respect, awe, and subtle tension. And now it was time for her to leave, just as quietly and effortlessly as she had arrived. The Navy SEAL watched her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. His earlier smirk, the one that had suggested casual challenge, was completely gone. He realized that he had underestimated her. What he thought would be a simple interaction had turned into a lesson in authority, presence, and quiet power. He had asked for her call sign almost as a joke, and she had given him an answer that left him stunned, silent, and fully aware of the force she carried. She had earned respect without raising her voice, without boasting, and without making a scene. It was the kind of presence that lingered long after someone left the room. She stood, moving with the same calm precision that had marked every action since she entered. Her posture was straight, confident, and unassuming all at once. She nodded politely to the bartender, who gave a small, respectful smile, understanding without needing explanation that he was in the presence of someone exceptional. Patrons instinctively gave her space, lowering their voices and making way as she moved toward the exit. No one spoke, no one tried to engage her further. There was an unspoken understanding that this moment was hers alone, and that she had already said more than enough. As she reached the door, she paused briefly, casting a final glance over her shoulder. The Navy SEAL met her gaze, and in that brief exchange, a silent respect passed between them. No words were needed. He understood fully that she was someone extraordinary, someone whose reputation and skill were not just legend but reality. It was a rare moment when two people, both trained in skill, courage, and discipline, recognized the gravity of another's presence instantly. That acknowledgement alone carried weight far beyond the ordinary. The bar seemed to exhale as she stepped outside. Conversations slowly resumed, but they carried a new tone, one of quiet awe. Patrons exchanged glances, some whispering quietly, trying to process what had just occurred. Even those who had never heard of Night Raven felt a subtle shift, an intangible sense that they had witnessed something remarkable. It wasn't fear that gripped them, it was respect, the kind of deep, instinctive admiration that comes from recognizing true ability and quiet authority. The Navy SEAL remained in his seat for a moment longer, processing the encounter. He understood now why the name Night Raven had been spoken in hushed tones, why it carried weight among elite operators, and why it commanded respect without effort. He had witnessed the legend firsthand, not through reports or stories, but in the calm, controlled, and understated way she carried herself. It was a reminder that true skill and authority don't need to be flaunted. They simply exist, and the world responds accordingly. Outside, she walked into the night, unhurried and composed. Her presence seemed to leave a ripple behind her, an invisible mark on everyone who had seen her, even for a few minutes. She didn't look back, and she didn't need to. Her impact was already felt, lingering in the minds and hearts of those who had been present. The quiet power of her call sign, Night Raven, had transformed an ordinary bar into a place where legends briefly walked among the everyday. The patrons gradually returned to their normal routines, but the memory of her presence remained. Even casual conversations carried a subtle weight, and glances occasionally darted toward the door she had exited. The bartender, who had served countless people over the years, quietly acknowledged that this had been a rare experience, one that wouldn't soon be forgotten. The room had changed, even if imperceptibly, because someone extraordinary had been there. The Navy SEAL, now fully composed, finally exhaled and shook his head slightly. He had been challenged, surprised, and impressed, all in the span of a single moment. He understood that she had shown far more than just a call sign. She had demonstrated courage, skill, and control, all without needing to prove herself. He had witnessed firsthand the kind of presence that commands respect effortlessly, the kind of authority that leaves people silent and attentive without a word of explanation. Her departure left the bar in a state of subtle reverence. People returned to their drinks, conversations, and routines, but the experience lingered. The story of Night Raven would be whispered quietly among them, retold with awe, and remembered long after the evening ended. She had shown that true greatness doesn't require drama. It requires presence, calm, skill, and earned respect. And in that ordinary bar, she had become extraordinary. As the night continued outside, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only the impression of her name, her presence, and the silent acknowledgement of her skill. The world around her went on as usual, unaware that for a few moments, it had brushed against legend. And the Navy SEAL, and all who had witnessed it, would remember the night when Night Raven walked into a bar, revealed her call sign, and left the entire room silent, awestruck, and forever changed.